I was driving on PCH and I had to stop the car because I could only see about a foot or two in front of me. And I was thinking, hopefully there's not a fire truck coming the other way that's, barreling down PCH and going to nail me.
I learned some important things recording today's interviews for this photo walk edition that have me contemplating just how special and remarkable many photographers are. Now, you don't have to photograph a natural disaster or big news event to be a remarkable documenter. After all, this tapestry of pictures we're making, even of the most mundane things, is historically or personally important to someone. How many times have I commented that I wish I'd photographed my grandfather's famous, not so famous tobacco and confectionery shop on the main northerly drag into London. It was the last of a generation kind of shop. The sort you'd pay good money to go visit in living museums, and it was my playground week after week. If only I'd carried borrowed my mum's Instamatic at the time. It looked, honestly, it did. It looked like Ollivanders in Harry Potter, though the walnut shelves had row after row after row of heavy glass jars of Bartleby's Boiled Wonders and Mrs. Scriving's Sherbet Lemons rather than wands. But we really do have a picture of the world, thanks to the work of photojournalists who've strived to show what's happening in our lives, from the beautifully thoughtful, ruminative pictures by W. Eugene Smith, who created that fantastic photo essay, Country Doctor, to the photographs we're going to talk about today, made by a photographer called Ted Soqui, who's lived in and documented life in LA for 4 decades. Ted was introduced to me by a friend of the show, Marissa Roth, who has a photo essay as well that I'll feature as the second letter effectively into the show today. Now, we've referenced the LA fires in the last couple of weeks, of course, but I thought you might be interested to really understand the unusual work on so many levels and the considerations made by the photojournalists who've covered fires of this magnitude. There are many moments today. There really are moments where I was thinking during the studio recording of my conversation with Ted, where I honestly thought, was not expecting that. Ted Soqui chronicles the streets of LA, documenting pivotal events like the 1992 LA riots and the COVID-19 pandemic more recently, of course. His work has been featured in publications like Time and Rolling Stone and the LA Times, and he's certainly regarded by his peers as a visual historian of modern American life. He thinks and speaks thoughtfully, as you'll hear, contemplative about his approach to documenting the world around him. And though he does and has travelled extensively, I think it's true to say that LA is his photographic heartbeat. So, a photo walk show today about covering the LA wildfires of 2025, which seems, and it is, in a literal sense, many thousands of miles away from the scene that I'm walking in today, looking out and seeing fresh rainfall on very vibrant grass. So yes, it does seem a long way away to me, but like me, I think you'll be fascinated and moved by the considerations and choices you make when photographing something as important as the LA wildfires of 2025 story. Wildfires in the past have generally been named after the locality most affected, like the Getty Fire of 2019, but the scale of this is obviously different. I spoke to Ted this Sunday just gone, a rest day and a clean-up day for him and his kit, as you'll hear. So I'd like you to meet on the show today a very special photographer.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I've covered fires for most of my career, And every time I see a fire cloud, it strikes me as how giant they get, how massive and how much of the sky it takes over. You get too close, next thing you know, the propane tank blows up and you're covered in shrapnel. So you're doing all this in your head in the middle of a fire and you're trying not to die. Sparks and smoke in 100-mile-an-hour wind. This was a jet engine, blowing hot exhaust in your face, and now you're asked to work in this environment. It could be sometimes dead quiet, and it could be punctuated by howls. That's punctuated by things blowing up, and your ears are just full of soot, and it just becomes like the dark white noise. You almost have to be really at one with your camera and just gotta guess at the exposures, and you can't even feel the camera actuating when it's just so loud and nasty.
That's Ted Soqui, my guest on the show today, along with an appearance by Marissa Roth, our friend of the show too, who was an LA photojournalist for many years. It's the Friday Photo Walk, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, accompanied by the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in, plus talking with special guests from around the world. There are some letters into the show in the mailbag today, and I'll give you a flavour of those in a moment. But before that, thank you to those who believe in the podcast enough that you're Patreon members, or extra milers, as I call you. And to MPB, who are an important partner keeping this show rolling. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. Right, on the show today and from the mailbag, Vicky Robb shares a quote from a Mexican photographer that is, I think, totally inspiring. Marissa Roth shares her essay about the LA fires, some thoughts about how your senses guide your picture making. Tom Warburton has been, he's in India and he's been making a cracking audio postcard of his time there for us. And I'm going to play it on the show today. And Wesley Harney is finding out how photos on your doorstep are true and very real photographic gold. Plus, the one-word assignment from Ted Forbes, which is really grabbing your imagination. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Some spare film, maybe an extra SD card, check. Well, let's walk then. I didn't get an answer last week and I'm walking at Greenham Common again. It's such a great place to walk in the winter. There's so many different walks and some of it's undercover, which I need today because of the rain. Soggy letters otherwise, but I took a picture last week and I'm going to make there's a couple of sketchbook images to start the show that I'd like to make now. I took a picture of what I can only describe as some sort of metal pipe with a sphere with a round table. I'm doing a terrible job at describing this. Look, I'll make a picture. It looks like it's some sort of pylon with a surface for something to sit on top of it, like a light. I mean, this is an old airbase after all. 1/2/5 shutter speed, f4, and 400 ISO. It's a dank picture. Let me get another one. Come on. Answers on a postcard for this item, please. What is this? I'll put it on the left. I'll tell you what, to make it easy, I'll make a few sketchbook images today, but I'll put this one. The top left-hand picture will be this. Answers on a postcard from those that have worked at military bases. We have a few of what this is. What this thing sticking out the ground is. Right, that's done. I have another sketchbook picture I want to make, and it's actually one I'm going to use for the assignment. I'll talk about the assignment in a while, actually. But it's now I think this used to be, yes, this was one of the old fire buildings. It's now desolate and it's just been graffitied over, but again, shutter speed 1/25 f4 and 200 ISO. But the reason I'm taking it is because, there we go, or another one, hang on, is because there is a splash of red on this building. Somebody's been up and they've graffitied red on what was a red door. So that is my assignment picture. There are other splashes of red on there. A bit of a spoiler, really, for the assignment to come. But by now, this time of the month, you know what the assignment is generally. You are such an important part of this show. What you write in with gives our community a real uniqueness. Your thoughts about walking, creativity and photography provides a very welcome respite from the noise of this world. As together during this show we put some miles under our feet and make a picture or two, as I just have, to remind us of where those footprints were left. If you have a picture or story to send in, then I'd love to hear from you. Send to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. Right, letters. Actually, I want to start with a comment made after last week's show from the show page, where you can leave your thoughts. I read them all as they come in. This one from Vicky Robb, following last week's show with the photojournalist Claire Thomas, where I talked with her about her phenomenal work, but also laid reference to a project by Bob Shonkoff, who wrote in about a project he'd never expected to make. Do you remember the project Insomnia? To accompany his experiences of suffering from it, he decided to make pictures in the middle of the night instead of lying awake, worrying about why he couldn't sleep. Thanks, Neil, says Vicky, for a perfectly timed episode for my recent insomnia brought on by flu. Oh, Vicky. Listening to the life experiences of Claire as a photojournalist in the small hours this morning kept me totally absorbed and away from self-pity. And I was jolted up by the question around why the still photograph. Yes. It was a question I asked Claire around this idea of why or how it still has the potency that it does, the still photo. That is, particularly to tell quite stark stories, which is very relevant, of course, to today's show. Vicky says, it brought back a quote in a book I was reading only yesterday. The Aperture book of Graciela Itubides on dreams, symbols and imagination. Ted Forbes mentioned Graciela to us a couple of weeks back. She's one of the most influential contemporary photographers of Latin America. She's made powerful pictures documenting everyday life in Mexico for half a century. I will leave some links so you can go and enjoy her work and have a look at it. Anyway, Vicky says, on page 14, Graciela writes, I had good teachers in the film school, but there was something about still photography that attracted me. Film is like a novel, while photography is like a poem. That should really have been the PS today, shouldn't it? We've peaked early. Film is like a novel, while photography is like a poem. Just wonderful. Graciela did intend on a life in film directing, but she changed direction. I think the world of photography is doubtless richer for that decision, and her documentary through her still cameras. Look at this. Look at these greens, pups. He's off exploring today, is Sir Barkalot. A couple of weeks ago we were walking these parts and I lost him for about 10 minutes. I thought, you're getting bold. And then he appeared like, what's the fuss? What's the matter? Stop calling me, I'm doing stuff. Doubtless chasing a squirrel, were you? Look at his ears go up. Right, I love this. Look at the moss, look at the lichen. There's just through the trees here, beautiful colours today, really. Look at this. Right, I can hear that we're very close to the road, which isn't quite so pleasant. 1/25, F4. That seems to be the setting today, Neil. It does indeed. Just a sketchbook photo of what we find along the trail. I did say that I had a photo essay to read from the photojournalist Marissa Roth, which I suspect may also feature in some newspapers in the coming weeks. And now Marissa in 1992 was part of a team, and we've talked about this on the show before, who won a Pulitzer for coverage of the LA riots, and she's offered it up, this essay, as one of our letters into the show, so I'm really grateful for it. And it felt to me in many ways like a poignant letter, really, to a city that Marissa no longer lives in, 5,400 miles away in London. She's watched, horrified by seeing the places that she knows and has photographed in just disappear. But it's also a letter of hope, and the perfect introduction to my guest today, Ted Soqui. And I thought I'd probably do it more justice if I asked my studio self to read Marissa's words.
On assignment as a photojournalist, working in Los Angeles for 25 years, for both the Los Angeles Times and New York Times, I covered an array of stories, from wildfires and the 1992 riots to the Academy Awards and earthquakes. Born and raised there, I implicitly understood the dualities, the gorgeous light and fast-forward eternal optimism of a young city set against the inevitable tectonic uncertainty. But it was the annual fires that disquieted me the most, as everyone was on edge with the Santa Ana winds and the seasonal understanding of what might happen. These were the worst stories to cover, as it was imperative to stay safe doing one's job while trying to make photographs that told a terrible story. The first fire I covered was in Malibu in 1986, tasked with making indelible images of the aftermath and the stark, monochromatic landscapes of destruction sitting silently where the flames had roared only days before. There was never time to absorb my own trauma as a witness to whatever the emotionally wrenching scene was, a car crash, a gang shooting victim, or a weeping man leaning on a cane, looking at the ashen remnants of his burned-out home. What struck me with the second fire I covered was how fickle the flames could be. One house still standing, and the one next to it gone. It was a harrowing lesson in fate. I no longer live in LA, but I've been glued to the news and the heartbreaking, searing images of the horrendous wildfires this past week. And I've been thinking and worrying about the photographers who are out there in the midst of it, feeling the heat, breathing the smoke, all the while trying to come to terms with what they're experiencing while interpreting visually the distressing scenes of loss. It's one thing to cover a tragic story half a world away from where one lives, being able to leave, putting those emotions and reckonings into a certain perspective, sitting at a safe distance. But it's quite another experience to cover stories when it's your own city that's on fire. And in the case of my good friend, photojournalist Ted Soqui, to photograph in Altadena, the neighborhood where he grew up as it was burning. The Chumash, a Native American people who lived along the Southern California coast for millennia, knew the burn patterns of these mountains and the power of the winds on downslopes heading towards the Pacific Ocean. The land has burned many times before. The Palisades community burned to the ground in 1961, but the sorrow of what is lost exists every time in the present. Just like the flora that covers these vast hillsides that needs to burn in order to reseed itself, a whole city is now learning to live with this staggering event, and remarkably coming together in unexpected ways.
And my thanks to Marissa for allowing me to read your photo essay as a letter in today's show. The emotional picture received is that you've sent as well is really very special, and I'm going to pop that on the show page today. And I wanted to follow it up with a few moments of conversation with her in a short while, actually. So you'll hear from Marissa on the show today, sandwiched between my conversations with Ted Soqui, who I'd like you to meet right now for part one of two parts of a conversation today.
A major fire now rapidly tearing through Southern California again.
The crews right now are scrambling to contain these flames. They're trying to prevent this fire from jumping over the fire
Strong
line.
Santa Ana winds are also expected to last through Wednesday, with the strongest winds occurring on Tuesday.
We want to begin tonight with news that the Los Angeles area does not need. There is a new wildfire that is tearing through the dry brush.
First up, Ted, you and your family, I'm hoping and praying that you're among the luckier homeowners. Because this is, we had a moment before we turned the mics on, as it were, and you said, this is strange, because I'm not parachuting into this story. I'm part of it.
Yes, and I'm actually, if you drew a line between the two fires, I'm right in the center. Wow. So I could look out one window and see one fire, and look out another window opposite and see the other fire. So I'm fairly safe here, and I'm in an area that's kind of more city-like than nestled against the mountains like the Palisades and Altadena.
But I would imagine you still look out those windows on each side thinking, please God, no.
Oh yeah, I've covered fires for most of my career, and every time I see a fire cloud, it strikes me how giant they get, how massive and how much of the sky it takes over. It's still never get used to it. I start driving it, my heart rate goes up, and my eyes open up a little bit, and I go, oh my God, I'm driving into that. And it's never something you get used to. It's not a pleasant experience, and it's hard to describe until you see it. Description doesn't really tell you what you're going to see. I could tell you there was a big cloud, but until you see, you're like, oh my God, that's a huge cloud of fire.
Tens of thousands of people, as we speak, are still evacuated from their homes. I know some have been lucky enough to return, but still, there's a lot away. And this is, as we record this is the 19th of January. It's a Sunday. So it's a news story that will doubtless change much by the time this airs on Friday again. And tomorrow, Monday, I think more strong Santa Ana winds are forecast, aren't they? So this is a short-lived break for you. You've taken a little bit of time off to find yourself, find your feet, back your material up, but you're back out tomorrow, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll be back out tomorrow and taking the day off today to clean the camera gear. It's all behind me, and I'm just letting it air out. It all smells like fire damaged, and it doesn't go away fast, but if you could smell it, you'd be like, oh my God, that's... Yeah. But yeah, I'll be out tomorrow, and I plan to do drone photography rather than drive around.
There is quite a. I was looking through your portfolio of the firework. You've shot a bit with drones so far, haven't you?
Yeah, we had a brief clearance with the FAA, the Federal. What is it?
Aviation Authority, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And they gave us a brief clearance to fly if you are a FAA license holder. Yeah. And you follow every red tape and rule they have. They gave us about an hour to fly around in. And then they're moving what they call TFRs, the temporary flight restrictions. So those are being moved. They have different shapes, and they're moved up closer to the mountain zones right now. So we're allowed to fly in Altadena for the most part. But the Palisades has a TFR on it right now. But I expect that to change, but maybe not with the winds coming tomorrow.
While we're clearly very focused on 2025, and you did lay reference to the fires before, I did notice some photographs of yours from 2019 when water was being dropped by helicopter on fires in various areas. So were you in any way, shape or form expecting this could be a disaster of a larger magnitude, just waiting for the right grim set of conditions?
Yeah, I actually put it on my calendar. I do paper calendars, and I monitor the wind reports, this time of year. And this one, I try to have a plan where I see a high pressure gradient forming over Nevada, over the Great Basin. I know that's going to create a giant windstorm here in Los Angeles. And I was looking at all the weather charts and talking to meteorologists and other friends, and they said this high pressure gradient formed over the Great Basin, and it's rotating. And I knew at that point LA was going to receive a lot of wind. every time we get wind like that, there's a flame. And then every time the flame, it's from the valley to the sea, unstoppable fire. So I had to prepare, gas up the car, carry water, have a fire suit, and you got to bring goggles, 2 pairs of goggles and a helmet. And if you go in without any of this stuff, you're just really going to put your life at risk. Just simple things, but bring a lamp, so you can see, because once the smoke blows laterally, along the ground, it blocks out the sun.
Well, I saw that in one of your photographs with traffic trying to escape. There were a couple of police cars in front of them, and the thickness of the smoke on top, descending right on top of these cars, I thought, there's no way you'll be able to see anything.
You can't see anything. At a few points, I was driving on PCH, and I had to stop the car because I could only see about a foot or two in front of me.
Good God.
And I was thinking, hopefully there's not a fire truck coming the other way that's, barreling down PCH and going to nail me.
Yeah.
So you literally have to drive by Braille on the way back. The streets have little plastic dots on them. So you count I hit 1 dot, 1, 2, 3, hit another dot. Okay, I'm going the right way.
Wow.
So you drive by Braille to get out sometimes. And I got a little compass in my car. So, okay, I was going north. Now I'm going to turn the car, make sure I'm going south, not east or west. I don't want to go into the fire zone. I don't want to go into the ocean.
That's extraordinary, having to drive in that manner. That really is. Who are you working for, and who are you providing your photographs for this story this time around?
This time I'm working with a publication called Cal Matters.
Right.
And they cover everything in California, including climate change and politics. And I called them up, and they're like, a fire? Oh, I'm not so interested. But then they saw the reports come in, and they're like, okay, you're on all week. And then I syndicate some images through SEPA, and those images will go all over the world, including I'll shoot video as well for them.
It's the eve before the inauguration as we speak. I would not imagine you're talking about your publication being involved in politics, but I would not imagine there is a lot of mind being cast in that direction right now, despite clearly the political leaning anyway of California. But is that on your agenda tomorrow as you make your pictures as well?
It is not. And I am choosing to cover this story in a nonpartisan way if possible, because I think both parties in America bear a lot of responsibility for the lack of, fire and the lack of help that so many people are going to need. And the response was pretty good, but there was a lack of leadership here in Los Angeles. The mayor was flying to Ghana. I had it planned in my calendar, and I'm not a mayor. I was certainly, if I was, I would make sure I was here during that horrific wind event that, traditionally makes fires here in our basin. And the right wing has a lot to blame, where they want to play political games, with the homeowners and residents, make them beg and barrel through red tape to, get funds to rebuild and relive their lives and have joy and freedom here. So, these two spots are pretty wonderful spots. Altadena and the Palisades, what a wonderful place to live and do things. And Altadena as well. Altadena's nickname was Beautiful Altadena. So, and it was beautiful. It may become beautiful again, but you're nestled up right against the mountains, and you have waterfalls that you could hike to, and it's just a wonderful community. And the Palisades is wonderful. Everybody knows each other, and people wave at each other when they see each other, and it's a wonderful California experience.
It's interesting. There are many pictures of burned out expensive cars, and I purposefully choose to reference that. Also once beautiful homes. It's a strong, stark reminder that the fires had no regard for wealth, although there were a few exceptions.
There's a man, Rick Caruso. He's one of the wealthiest residents in Los Angeles. He owns a lot of properties and malls, and he hired his own fire department to come protect his properties. And they're literally the only properties in the center of the Palisades that didn't burn. It's quite stark. And when you see it, like, whoa. But he hired his own people to come in to spray foam and water, and everything else burned around it. That was one location that maybe money paid off.
Yeah.
But everywhere else is just steamrolled right through.
Razed to the ground. You've 4 decades of experience photographing news events, day to day, and then the extraordinary. And I'm wondering how this feels in terms of the tapestry of the stories that you have witnessed. I mean, I know you've shot the LA riots. That and this, would you say that these are perhaps the most potent stories on your doorstep that have affected you in an emotional capacity?
Yeah, I mean, most stories will affect me now just because I've been doing it for so long. Covered Hurricane Katrina, earthquakes, tornadoes, probably every natural disaster minus the water one. What's that called? The tsunamis and a volcano. I haven't covered a tsunami, a volcano.
Yeah.
Don't look forward to doing that. But of all of them, the fire, this fire in particular, probably is wearing at me emotionally. It's tough to sleep. It's hard to turn off, from what you see. That such a vast, everything's just gone. And it's hard to really process all that. And yet being in the midst of it, watching it happen and being helpless to stop it as well.
Well, I dare say you have friends, you have colleagues, you know that have lost their homes.
Yeah, and in fact, I saw one colleague who was in Altadena, and it was burning right around his condominium. And he's out shooting. I'm like, why are you not at your house or evacuating?
Yeah.
But he knew that he had to photograph as well.
Wow.
But yeah, friends and colleagues and friends that are lost property, but they have their lives and they'll rebuild. They'll be okay. But nobody really knows how it's going to happen. So there's a lot of chaos in that.
How do you stay present and focused mentally in the moment? Particularly with some of the starkly grim documents you've had to make of bodies being taken from the house, with a dignity, I might add, by the services. But they are very difficult photographs to make. And I wonder how you process those moments when you're photographing.
I probably don't use any, I don't have a certain way to do it. I don't pull it out of my head and say, but I try not to make light of that, try to show some dignity if possible. But it's never easy photographing somebody's body being removed from a house that they died in or tried to defend. I don't think I need to really get close and show bodies. I saw a lot of dead animals and stuff, and I was thinking I probably really don't need to photograph that. It's not a war zone, so it's really not about that. For me, it's more about the fire and what it does. So I'll use shorter lenses. I won't zoom in as tight and won't move around. Everybody that was there was quiet and try to show some dignity. And it's a solemn process for sure.
It's extraordinary how some things survived and have become a sort of a colour blot on the landscape. You shared with me the VW van, the blue VW van photograph, which is just odd, isn't it? It's like somebody drove it there, but they didn't. It was there, and then I saw your photograph of the smiling Christmas garden furniture characters. They're sat in this sort of land that's desolate, but they somehow survived. These sort of things have obviously piqued your real curiosity, haven't they?
They do, to a point. I try to really push myself from like whimsy, or making light of what happened. Sometimes you just can't, it's right there in front of your face. I see a lot of people, they try to shoot things and add a little like happiness to it, but this is a really heavy event. So I tried to keep that to a minimum if possible. But the blue van phenomenon is pretty amazing. There's actually 2. There's one in the Palisades and there's one in Altadena, and they're literally the same color, and they may even be the same year. Microbus, VW Microbus. And it's almost like the obelisk in 2001, A Space Odyssey, that appear in different parts of the earth. And they both look about the same shape. They have a little singe marks on them, but everything around them is gone.
But they've survived. These juxtaposition pictures are just very strange. You're very close with your cameras. It is possible to feel the heat through your pictures. And I know you say you take safety gear with you, but what else are you doing to make sure you stay safe? Because you can't be fully aware of how the fires can change in their velocity. I know you can judge the wind and what way it's coming, but things don't always act the way you're expecting them to.
They don't. And there's things called widowmakers, which are trees that have burned quickly and then they look like they're still in one piece, but they're hollowed out. So you can't park under a Widowmaker because if it drops and hits you on the head, it's going to knock you out.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody will see you get knocked out. Next thing you'll be knocked out, covered by charcoal and burned to death. So you're always looking up, checking the wind. You're like, okay, am I parked, near an escape route? Am I blocking a hydrant? I'm blocking the access road. There's a lot of things to consider. A lot of photographers, we receive wildfire training, and they give us some basic things to follow. But in real life, you have to shed some of those training and just use common sense, and not have a target fixation, where you see a fire and, just like, oh my God, and get too close. Next thing you know, the propane tank blows up and you're covered in shrapnel. So, power lines as well. You don't walk into any power lines, even if you're 100% sure they're de-energized. It's just not a good thing to do, not a good training.
I know there are other really surprising scenarios, particularly when it comes to handguns and to guns in general.
Oh, yeah. There's bullets. A lot of Angelenos have guns, so we hear a lot of gunfire from the ammo blasting off. The fire department has to deal with that. You see these guys just like saying, no, we're not covering this anymore. This is too much ammo in that house.
Did not even think of that.
People in the U.S. love their guns, and they have huge gun collections.
It's eyes in the back of your head, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of times, older photographers would tend to be a little further back from the action, where the younger, they're running on pure adrenaline, will run up to a fire and you want to say something, but people aren't going to listen. They're like, come on, get close, come with us. I'm like, no, I've done that before, and be careful. And it's going in one ear and out the other, of course.
The fire department, the medics, you're working alongside them to show these scenes. How do you work together so that they appreciate that you've got to do an important job? You're documenting this. It's important. But of course, they're fighting fires. How do you work together?
Well, generally, they keep us at bay, if possible. If they're working a fire, they want to have room to have their engines and trucks come in. But at this fire, there was no water. And the fire was burning much more vigorously in a ferocious manner, that the fire department wasn't able to take a stand and literally sit there with a hose. A lot of the fire department was just rescuing and making sure people could get out okay. As far as putting out the fires, they tried with the best intentions, of course, but when no water is coming out of the hydrants in their trucks, they have to roll up their hoses so they don't get caught, with their pants down and burn as well. So generally, we're pretty good. The police are usually pretty helpful. We carry our press credentials. I have them here somewhere, but we wear these and around our neck, and we have to bring second IDs as well to show, we're not just printing them in our, on our printer. So we have a second ID, and generally we're pretty good. If you show up in what they call PPE, the yellow thing I just showed you that you wear, and eye protection. If you show up, in shorts and, with the iPhone, you'll be broomed away or arrested if you don't leave.
Well, I noticed in your pictures a few military vehicles. I assume they're letting you through. I'm always horrified that anybody would use an opportunity to loot. It's human nature, sadly, in these areas all around the world when things like this happen. But you're allowed through.
Yeah, I'm allowed through. When we get these credentials, they run us through the FBI. They run us through all. If we have any felonies or any arrests, we're not allowed to get these credentials. Where we go through a lot of checks and double checks. Yeah. So, the credential means something that we're allowed through, where somebody just shows up, I live here, they're like, I'll stay back. It's a weird experience to be, let in, or other people are being held at bay.
My thanks to Ted Soqui, who returns shortly. I will link to Ted's work on the show page today, of course. If you've got a letter, or if you want to respond to anything you hear during the Photo Walk shows, then I'd love to hear from you. The email address to send your letters to is stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Delighted to receive your pictures too, showing me where you've walked, so we can share them on the show page. So if you're sending pictures in, 2,500 pixels wide, please. Make sure your email, we've had a few of late actually, email systems that squish and swoosh your pictures until they're so small they wouldn't even fit on a postage stamp. So send your pictures 2,500 pixels wide to stories@photowalk.show. If you don't know how to resize to 2,500, don't worry. Send them full res. I'll do the heavy lifting for you. We talk about senses today, about being able to hear or smell or feel a photograph. Because of the intense heat at times, obviously, during Ted's photography. And just a thought on that, although I didn't feel it appropriate to essentially run a complete ad read now for our Encounters workshop in April next to my chat with Ted. But I do want to mention that the senses play a very important role in all our workshops and retreats and adventures this year. There'll be some photographic senses challenges on our Indian adventure in March. Shh, say no more, Neil. And of course our 2 retreats in Scotland in September are now renamed senses, aren't they, due to embracing all the senses that can go into making a photograph. Plus Encounters, the 2-day London photographic experience and workshop, catchy Neil, has a particular micro assignment within it, where those who are joining me in April will be asked to think about combining a number of senses in one photograph for a particular reason. Shh, Neil, you're doing it again. I'll just say this then. The 5 senses play a very important role in how and why we make photographs, often without us really knowing it. Sight, when making pictures, is a given, I suppose. But what about our ears? They often lead us to a subject. Or how touch can be relayed through a picture. How the smell of a scene can be captured. Certainly with food photographers. Taste. You might think, taste, what, in a 2-dimensional photograph? No, taste, that's the skill of a food photographer, to lead you to salivate, if not physically, certainly mentally. So yes, Encounters is on the website. It's a very special 2-day workshop. We're doing lots of storytelling exercises. I say exercises with a small e, because it's an opportunity as well to really gather together, to share experiences, share thoughts, share learnings, and share our pictures, because we're making a zine and also a feature for the Photo Walk podcast through it. So there's so many senses included in that alone. Tactile, sound, and so on. Right, come on. Let's move swiftly on to the one-word assignment from Ted Forbes. And I have to say that as of noting down the number as I was preparing these notes, I think it's been one of the most subscribed to challenges so far, and with a week to go, I'm sure we'll receive more, but 70 pictures have come in. 70. Which is, can I use the word awesome? I don't know, Neil. Is it like Mount Everest, the towering peak that brushes the edge of the sky? Is it like the Great Barrier Reef that you can witness through a lens from space? Because if it is, you can use awesome, Neil. Otherwise, use the word mega, which will date you heavily and your kids won't talk to you again. But come on, 70. 70. Now, I know part of the fun is to try and take home the famous, not-so-famous flask, but I actually think that we have a page of inspiration that you can learn from. So if your picture is there, if you're one of the 70 so far and climbing, please take a bow. Really, because there's some really, can I say really again, inspirational stuff in there. It is, shh, don't tell anybody I said this, awesome. Here's Ted Forbes to remind us of what the challenge is for this month, as if you needed reminding.
The Photo Walk assignment.
Ted, a one-word assignment. What's it going to be?
Let's say red. So I've gotten into this idea of, and it's not my idea, but studying Japanese aesthetics, visual aesthetics, that have kind of a collection of things in the 20th century that were amalgamation of trying to bring Eastern concepts to the West. But the whole idea of, there's one of the concepts called one red spot, where there's one red spot in the image. And what that means is not necessarily there's one red dot in the image, but it means that there's something that's contrasting to everything else in the image that's small in size, that carries a lot of weight. And I love that. I also find color to be very interesting too. It's something that I like to avoid when I shoot black and white. But when I do incorporate, I believe that it needs to be there for a reason. And what is interesting to me is the weight of color. And red is a really tough one because our eye is so tuned into it. There's a recent campaign that Leica's done on Instagram where they've done all these images that are predominantly red, and I think they're overdone. And I get it. You know, they have one red dot on their cameras. But anyway, it's a little obvious. So here's the assignment: is go out and try and incorporate the color red some way, shape, or form. Try and use it as a contrast. Try and use it as something that's small in the composition but carries a lot of visual weight. I think that's a really interesting challenge.
Best of luck. Send your pictures to stories. What's the matter, pups? Have you got a picture to send in? Have you got one as well? Yeah? Okay. Well, send it in. No point getting... Don't get grumpy. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. As I said before, if you can resize to 2,500 pixels, great. Otherwise, I'll do the heavy lifting. No watermarks, no borders, but do include links to your socials, your website, your Flickr, your glass. If you can put the whole URL in for me, that really does help. And, anywhere else where we can enjoy your work, I'll link to that. And also send me some thoughts about the picture if you think it helps with the storytelling. All the pictures and stories will go on the assignments page, and some of the pictures also feature on our Photo Walk Instagram, which helps get more eyes on your work. I'll be sure to tag you straight back if you have an Insta, of course. Good luck. I think this is a fantastic assignment. It really has had you thinking. You all right, pups? You okay? It's getting a bit windy. We've got more storms on the way, haven't we? At the weekend. Right. Do you want to... Come on, let's do some ASMR. Oh, you've earned a treat. You really have. Here we go. It's been so good. It's a bit mizzog. It's raining. I'm recording my letters and my thoughts with you. And there we go. Is that a good one? And he's getting sopping. Oh, have we? Do you think we might have earned our bacon butty, eh? At the bacon butty shop today. What do you think? Do you think so? Oh, right. Letters. Now, this one is actually not a letter in the conventional term. My flabber was garsted when I received a wonderful note from Tom Warburton, who is right now in India at a massive life and cultural event. This is making me even more excited for our visit. Now, Tom didn't send a letter, no, he sent a postcard. Well, to be honest, he sent an audio postcard. 2 roughly 3 minutes-ish pieces, which are fantastic. And I'm about to play them to you. He recorded them on location into his trusty iPhone. Other flavours are available. So here is a postcard from India with some really wonderful cultural facts about a pilgrimage and event that he's been attending, a massive photo walk that he's been making. And if it inspires you to think as you listen, hang about, I'd like to make an audio postcard, then I'd love to hear from you too. And I will share some of the pictures from Tom on the show page today. So what he's talking about here makes sense as you have some reference points as you listen to him when you look at the show page today. I've got some more thoughts actually about the whole business of audio postcards, business with a small b, which I'll share in a moment. But in the meantime, here is Tom Warburton with his camera and iPhone sound recorder in India.
Hello, Photo Walk listeners. My name's Tom Warburton. I'm a retired mediocre bureaucrat turned amateur photographer, and I'm here to tell you really, I'll describe the scene in front of me really. I'm currently at the confluence of the river Ganges and the Yamuna in a city called Prayaraj, where the biggest gathering of humanity ever is happening over the next, it lasts 44 days. I'm in about day 10 at the moment. The reason I'm here talking to you now is to give you a little breakdown of a couple of adventures I've had. One, extreme photo walk, and the second, my visit to the Kumbh Mela. So the first adventure was that between September and November in 2024, I walked from the source of the Ganges, Gangotri Glacier, and I walked to this site here, what they call the Sangam, the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna. Too many tales to tell, really, so I'll just have to give you a couple of highlights. I mean, the Himalayas were amazing, walking down small roads, pretty much following the river at that stage, and staying in small homestays or hostels, and then walking sort of maybe 25, 30, 35 kilometres a day. For the first couple of days I was with some Indian friends who sort of got me going, and then after a place called some hot springs called Ganori, I then went off by myself pretty much all the way down to Rishikesh. It was a delight, really. You bump into sadhus walking the other way, the Hindu holy men, and then villagers who were just surprised to see me and happy to usually have their photo taken. Got down to Rishikesh, which is most Westerners, most Europeans will know, is the place where the Beatles went to the ashram. There's artis, evening artis there, which are prayers to the river, where the Hindu priests light ghee candelabras, I can only describe them as, and there's a prayer ceremony to the river. Fantastic photo opportunity that. I took some great photographs, I hope, of people. I'm the kind of photographer that I just have sort of one camera, one lens. It's the interaction with the people, really, that I love, even though it's a bit bewildering sometimes, and my Hindi wasn't that good. But I did have one trick, really. I had a video, an Indian friend of mine, Serbi, made a video of her explaining in Hindi what I was up to, and I used that every day. I just show people the video that I was walking down the Ganges. I was doing what they call a Ganga Yatra, a Ganga pilgrimage, and that I was wanting to take people's photographs, and usually that resulted in people agreeing to me taking their photograph, wondering what this stupid European was doing wandering across the Indian plains. Anyway, that's pretty much it. That was my first adventure. I'll do another piece on my feelings and experience of the Kumbh Mela. The Kumbh Mela is a religious festival, a bathing festival, primarily a bathing festival for Hindus, that happens every 12 years. The smaller festivals happen, and by smaller I mean still millions of people, happen every 6 years and sometimes every 3 years. And they rotate around 4 cities in India, the biggest being here at Prayaraj and at Haridwar, at the base of the Himalayas. But this one, the Kumbh Mela, only happens one at every 144 years, and at Prayaraj, which is the confluence of the holy river Ganges and the Yamuna. The Yamuna is the river that flows past Delhi and then onto Agra, past the Taj Mahal, and then joins the Ganges here at Prayaraj. So this year is the Kumbh Mela, the big one, and it's estimated that 400 million people will visit this site during the 44-day festival. And on the big bathing days there might be up to 40 million people on site. The first big royal bathing day happened about a week ago on the morning of the 14th, and they've estimated that 17 million people took a dip that day, and they've got it so well organised. There's 30 temporary bridges, pontoon bridges across the rivers, and a massive camping site. I mean, it's huge. I looked up actually that 200,000 people go to Glastonbury. So if there's 40 million people on this site on a particular day, that's 200 Glastonburys. Just imagine that, 200 Glastonburys all at once. And at the Sangam, at the very tip of the confluence, is the holiest place to take your dip. And on the royal bathing days, the sadhus parade down to that site and take a ritual sacred dip in the river. And on the first day, on the morning of the 14th, it was the Naga sadhus, the naked warriors sadhus, that led the parade. I was there, we got there about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and kind of slept out until the parade started about 5 or 6. It was absolutely amazing. I was lucky enough to be with a Indian photographer friend of mine, Manoy, and he led me through the crowd and managed to get right to the front, really. I managed to get pretty close to them as they went past. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to to the water side. I'm going to try that at the next one. I've spent the rest of the time really walking the site and going particularly to the Juna Akara, which is one of the clans, one of the clans is the best word I can come up with, really, of the sadhus. And there's various sadhus that are doing various austerities. Some have got their hand in the air, and they've had one hand in the air for decades, and it's atrophied and stuck where it is. Others have got the beads on their heads. They're carrying maybe 30, 40 kilos of beads in a sort of headdress. Others don't undertake such austerities, but they'll sit by their holy fires and give blessings to the pilgrims that come to see them. It's just an amazing sight. There are millions of people here every day. The site's so big that it's not really a crush. You can walk around and enjoy talking to people. People come up and want selfies with the Westerners, so I've had hundreds of selfies taken, and I've just been taking portraits of people. It's a photographer's dream, really. I can't even begin to describe it. You've got to see it for yourself, really. So just, if you ever have the chance to come to India, do so. If you ever have the chance to come to a Kumbh Mela, do so. It's one of the most amazing experiences you can ever have. Highly, highly recommended.
Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Tom. Tom Warburton. His time and adventures in making pictures and sounds in India. Glorious. Fabulous pictures, Tom. Really, really. And I'm hoping, because I know you've recorded more audio, so I'm hoping that you'll, and films by the sound of it, I'm hoping that you'll make use of them on your website and socials. I think I might stop press. I think I might invite Tom to, when he returns home, to come onto the Extra Mile and talk about the process behind the whole thing, because this was the first time, believe it or not, he'd done this, the audio postcards, that is. And with sound being such a precious part of socials these days, it might be something you could beautifully weave into your ideas. Right. I did suggest that I'd be having a short chat with Marissa Roth today as well, who led me to the powerful, wonderful, creative story making of our guest Ted Soqui today. And so here's a few moments with Marissa, who I was keen to include today, to ask how she feels about the fires in LA as she watched these events unfold thousands and thousands of miles away from her new home in London.
Marissa, I would have already read your essay, so thank you for that. And thank you too for introducing me to Ted, who is an extraordinary photojournalist. He, of course, is on the ground in LA with this. You're in London right now, but you've photographed the fires before. You lived in LA for a long, long time. It's a story that you're familiar with, as your essay points out. How has it felt being so far away from a story that's affected you in your past as well?
It's been a really, really hard couple weeks, actually. It's been slightly shattering in a sense. It's all so familiar. First, having been born and raised in Los Angeles, and then certainly working there as a photojournalist for 25 years, to sort of comprehend the magnitude of these fires and the destruction. And I know these neighborhoods. And actually, I have another dear photographer friend named Bart Bartholomew. He was a photojournalist in LA for many, many years. He's a bit older than I am. He shot for the New York Times for many, many years. And I knew he and his wife live in the Palisades. And I texted him, the first day of the fire. And I said, Bart, are you okay? Yeah. And I got a message from him once he sort of woke up in LA. And he said, we're okay, but we're waiting to get news on our house. Literally 5 minutes later, he texted me back and he said, we just heard we lost the house.
Oh, no.
Not only did they lose the house, but he lost his entire photo archive. He had a huge collection of vintage W. Eugene Smith prints.
Oh, no.
From a photographer's standpoint, it was like I was hearing from him in real time, which was crushing, heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a strange couple of weeks for me. I feel like in a way I haven't been in London, but I've been there with my heart and my soul, my friends. It's my place. I chose to leave, but there's a part of me, of course, it never leaves me. So it's been frightening, heartbreaking. But on the other hand, what I think has been fascinating is how LA seems to be pulling itself together, the amount of goodwill that's happening from a Stephen Stills initiated fire aid concert that's supposed to happen in 2 venues at the end of the month. Everything from great chefs who are hosting virtual events. And LA became pretty rough and mean and, a bit almost selfish. People just forgot kind of a level of kindness. LA has felt very brutal, especially during and since the pandemic. And I'm wondering if this isn't kind of a moment to reset, where everybody remembers community and remembers each other. After the LA riots in '92, people were out with each other, repainting buildings, helping to rebuild fire damage, things like that. There was a lot of goodwill, and I'm seeing it again now, which is extraordinary for such a huge city. So there's a part of me that's hoping that, maybe something good will come out of this horrendous event. But I won't lie. I've been devastated. I've been distracted. I've cried a lot. I've spoken to a lot of friends. So it's been hard. Finally, today and yesterday, I feel like I found my center again.
You were part of a team that won the Pulitzer for the LA riots story and the coverage that. And did you work with Ted on that?
No, I can't remember who he was photographing for at that time. He did a lot of work for the LA Weekly. It was a weekly sort of tabloid-shaped publication. It was very serious with a little more sort of loose writing, but great writers. So I know he worked for them for a long time.
Well, I'll spare your blushes, but after we turned the tape off, as it were, he was very glowing about you and said how much you've helped him in his career. There's some extraordinary pictures that he's made. One thing occurred to me, and the picture that you sent me, that black and white photograph.
That was my first fire in 1986 in Malibu.
Right, okay.
And I think the point of me sending it is, that Malibu has burned since then a couple times. The Palisades burned to the ground in 1961. I remember when I was a kid, there was a huge fire in Bel Air. So these burn sites, if you will, they've been burning and forever there. There's burn patterns. They know how the winds go, the Santa Anas and which direction that they blew. The Chumash and other Native Americans who lived like in the San Gabriel Mountains, they understood how to protect against the fires and also the burn patterns. So unfortunately, contemporary developers and burgeoning population in LA built in places that traditionally hadn't been necessarily the best places to build.
One thing there were many things I drew from the photographs that I've talked about with Ted, and there's no respect given to how much money you have. Some of the cars that are photographed are clearly very expensive cars. Equally, another thing that struck me with the photographs was the landscape. Often, the only thing standing in the house is or left in this scene is the central chimney stack. I compared it, whether it was clumsy or not, when I spoke with Ted, as photographs that I'd observed of Hiroshima, and that you see some central stacks still standing and nothing else. And I know that's a very stark and very grim comparison, but I saw the same when I looked through your photograph.
Well, I think, chimneys and fire stacks, as you call them, they're pretty hard to destroy. I mean, you think about here in London, the millions of chimney stacks, not to mention buildings built of brick. Yeah, I mean, but fire is fire, I suppose, whether it's, a wildfire or an atomic bomb. Unfortunately, it's the destruction of things that are not indestructible. I don't know if Ted mentioned this. He mentioned this on the phone the other day when I spoke to him about you and the program. And he said that there's a real problem, though, in the Pacific Palisades with the cleanup because there were so many Tesla cars. And because there were so many, I don't know if it's the battery that melts or something, but it's a real hazardous material. Nice. And there's a tremendous amount of hazmat cleanup to be done to make sure, it's quite toxic. Yeah. So, which was a sort of a twisted irony, I suppose. But yeah, if you're gonna, I don't know if you're gonna talk to him again, but that might be something to bring up.
He didn't mention that, but I'm glad you have, because that's filled in another part of the story that I otherwise did. We talked about cars and the destruction, of course. I know they're safe, so I'm sort of asking this to demonstrate the fact that you still have your archive in LA.
Yeah,
we kind of had a conversation privately, didn't we, where we might have a fun sort of visit, both of us, to go to LA to pick up because you refused to fly your archive back. So
right.
We're going to aren't we going to fly there and drive them all back to? Was it to
New York?
To New York and then cross over?
And then bring them over on the Queen Mary too.
Watch this.
I have to make a little more money this year to swing it. I think I don't know. To me, it makes perfect sense.
Well, when Marissa said it, I put my hand up immediately, like I was in class and I was only 11 years old again. Me, miss me. But
it's still on my mind, Neil. It hasn't left my mind. And
joking aside, they're safe, aren't they? And that's what you mean when you mention your other photographer friend.
No, I was a nervous wreck the first few days because my archive is in Pasadena at an art services company, which thank God was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But no, on top of watching everything, I was terrified of everything I own is there. And but the photo archive is the most important.
I'm glad it's safe.
It's been a rough time, but I'm here and I feel for everybody there. The air quality has been terrible.
I bet.
Water supply, apparently they're recommending people do not use tap water to drink or to cook because a lot of runoff with toxins and things, fire retardant, has gotten into the water supply. The thing with LA is it has this reputation of being this young city where everything is possible, where everybody comes to invent and reinvent themselves. And I guess I have faith that the city will survive this. Tragically, a lot of very important mid-century homes and architecture got lost. That's a great tragedy. But I think LA will survive this in a different way. They're going to have to reconsider different types of construction that's potentially more fire resistant, building and things like that. It'll take a different set of sort of tacts, if you will, because the fires aren't going to stop. And certainly climate change is here. For there to be a wildfire like this in January would have been unheard of 20 years ago.
And my thanks to Marissa Roth. And indeed, not just for her view and the essay that I read earlier, but also her introduction to Ted Soqui, who returns in a moment. Quite a few guests on the show this week, what with a postcard too. Although do keep your letters coming in. The mailbag is looking fabulous. We've got some wonderful stories, some fantastic stories to read over the weeks to come. We really have. But I'm hoping to hear from you about the places that you've been photographing in of late. And though we've been talking about adventures in exotic places, a good number of your letters are about making stories closer to home, where you so often find magic. So perhaps some stories about that as well are those stories. They're always very inspirational. Stories at photowalk.show is the address. Brisk look ahead to next week. My guest is somebody who has a very, very special story of life and of resilience. And it's a story that closes with just a heartwarming account about giving back and what that means to her. I really felt at the end of our chat richer, much emotionally richer for our conversation. So my guest next week is Tracy Halliday, a photographer who makes the most delicious pictures of nature. And it's a life gift that she's learned to embrace for reasons that you'll hear next week. On the subject of giving back, and actually also on the subject of finding gold in them there hills of your own neighbourhood. It was a couple of months back, granted, but we had an episode about life's teachers, a personal story actually, where I talked about my good friend, documentary photographer Giles Penfound, who was talking. I tell you what, if we had mentioned bingo, you might do well for having the words Giles and Penfound, or the names. He was talking about his project Hometown Stories, and if you think about it, this is very pertinent in that Ted Soqui has spent the greatest deal of his life photographing in one place, albeit a large city, LA. But there was some feedback to that episode, 450, the one called Our Greatest Teachers, from Wesley Harney, who said, hello from the future, which I'm assuming you mean by the fact you're in Australia land, Wesley. You're always ahead of us. One day, at New Year, I'm going to watch the New Year celebrations and they'll say, Sydney will be celebrating it in 12 hours' time. I think, what? Hey, are we ahead for the first time? Hello from the future, he says. Firstly, get your sofa of flattery ready, my friend, to hide behind. Oof. It's difficult dragging it through woodland, Wesley. It really is. Takes ages to get it over the tree stumps. Some thoughts on episode 450. I think one of the most poignant moments for me from this conversation was a very small one that perhaps got a little passed over. And that was when Giles said that he'd been photographing in the same area for over 20 years. I've only recently begun to drag myself out of another dive into my personal cavern of creative despair, and one way that I do that is to force myself to go out walking with my camera. Often, I feel that there isn't really anything around me worth making an image of, but to hear Giles get so excited about his fence or his tree, and still so eager to capture it, has given me a nudge. A little piece of my mind open with those words, and I have you and your community to thank for it. You're all such a beautiful collection of souls, and you do bring people joy. Well, that's very kind of you to say. I think we work together on that, don't we, team? All of us, yes? So thank you, Wesley. Very generous words. And I'm glad you enjoyed that episode. So it seems appropriate timing, actually, to bring back Ted Soqui for the second part of our conversation. He spent 40 years documenting his hometown, LA. This week, we're talking about the fires. I thought it was appropriate, and photographically, I've seen so much work from this terrible event. And Ted is certainly one of those who's been really in the thick of it, as you've heard already and will hear more now. Here's my conversation with Ted Soqui, part 2.
I was struck by some of the landscapes, the pictures of the burned out houses, and one of the features of that landscape being chimney stacks, the only thing that's left. That sort of central spine of the house, as it were, features in many of your photographs. And I was reminded, and I wasn't sure whether to draw this comparison, but I'm going to say it because I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, "Oh God, yeah." I was reminded grimly of the flattened landscape pictures from places like Hiroshima, where the central parts of the building, the chimneys or whatever, they stayed. Nothing else did. And I wonder what struck you most looking at the landscapes, because that's something I've noticed through the photography.
It is a grim comparison, but you're not the only one that I've heard make this. A lot of the structures people have referred to as, this looks like a war zone. This looks like something that happened in World War II. This looks like something that happened in Tokyo, firebombing, by the U.S. I hear this comparison a lot. And I really didn't get a grasp of that until I took to the air with the drone and just be able to see how vast, how much of a community was just devastated, completely left with the chimneys and the stone structures and maybe a pool of water. Yeah, that's a great comparison. And it's probably the only accurate comparison I heard that really describes what happened in these fires. Because these fires move so quickly, people tend to think of fire when they see fire, if you have somebody draw a fire, they're going to draw the flames, and then they're going to draw the smoke above it. These fires are burning this way, and the smoke's going this way.
Lateral.
So it's more like a blowtorch. There's no escape, and you have this blowtorch going over a vast community, just throwing hot coals and sparks and smoke in 100-mile-an-hour wind. It's really not a fire as we traditionally think of fire. When we say fireplace, it's kind of like gentle and, relaxing. This was more like a jet engine, blowing hot exhaust in your face. And now you're asked to work in this environment.
That, I think, is one thing that's, if not forgotten, it's overlooked to a degree. It's just the intense wind that you're standing in. If it were a hurricane story or a tornado story, 100-mile-an-hour wind, you'd be thinking, "Whoa, that must be difficult to work in." But you add fire to this, and debris, and not knowing what's coming out of the black, as you've already described. There's so much, isn't there, that you're encountering while making these pictures.
Yeah, and once again, wearing the fire suits, where you have to cinch up your collars and everything needs to be locked down so there's nothing flapping around. And there was a few gusts that took me almost off my feet in a fire, I guess, where I had to take a stance and kind of lean into it a little bit. As wind alone, yes, it's pretty horrific. You add fire and coals shooting at your face and eyes and body. And then you have a camera. As a photographer, you're looking as a cyclops. Very rarely. I never shoot like.
You never hold it out in front of you. No.
I never hold it out. It's up to you. You usually have one eye shut, so you're losing a little perspective. You almost have to be really at one with your camera, and just gotta guess at the exposures, and you can't even feel the camera actuating when it's just so loud and nasty. You're shooting on a different mental plane. If you're not good with your camera, you're not going to be good in a fire with the camera.
What is the sound, Ted?
It could be sometimes dead quiet, and it could be punctuated by howls. That's punctuated by things blowing up, and your ears are just full of soot, and it just becomes like the dark white noise, and you almost blot it out at one point because you can't hear anyway, so you're really operating with your eyes and instinct, I think. That was... it's like, okay, I walk this way, 50 steps. That means I have to walk back 50 steps. Don't go any further. Where's the fire going? Okay, get out of here. Find a new spot.
You've shot film as well for this as well. I know there's a lot of digital work on your portfolio, which I will share of this event. But there's film work as well. I wonder why you decided to shoot that as well.
Well, I've been using film again over the last couple of years. Right. And I brought the film camera as a backup in case my digital just melted or decided to break due to the forces of the fire. And I know that this film camera is built, it's all steel, and it's a real basic camera. It's just a couple things to, you operate the shutter speed and you can focus it. And once again, it's another Zen camera that you train with you don't really have to get into it. It's a rangefinder, so you could kind of guess. So that was my backup. And so at a few points, I'm like, I should use the backup because this is quite extraordinary. I want to see how it looks on film. And that camera took a beating. I tell you, it's like, it's an all metal camera, but it smells like a forest fire as well. Worked perfectly, It's like 250 f8 and just moved the aperture up and down a little bit. If it's, okay, I should be at 5.6. So it's a pretty easy camera where the digital, there's a lot, going on. There's a lot in the screen that you have to keep track of. But a film camera is just infinity focus, click, okay, advance. And so that's why I brought the film camera. Because if that thing's breaking, I'm probably in a really bad situation. But it's a very hardy thing to do is bring a film camera. It's not easy to shoot film in a fire because you have to guess the exposures. You can expose for the fire. Okay, the flame may be 3 or 4 stops from the reading. So you're doing all this in your head in the middle of a fire and you're trying not to die, but you have to cover this stuff. Like I said, it will wear on you after a few days, and I think it wore on me.
Well, your work, it really is, Ted, extraordinary. The fact that you have to think of all these things while you're making photographs of a news event, and many of these things to do with self-preservation. So I'm sure we wish you all the safety as you continue to cover this story as the fires hopefully begin to dissipate. Now, I'm not sure you've even had time to think about it, but is there anything that you're working on now that you're looking forward to getting back to?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to work on a book. The cover is actually kind of beautiful, I think, but these are just mock-ups. It's actually a rainbow.
Oh, I've seen that picture. That's an extraordinary picture. The rainbow it looks almost like lightning sort of connecting between the heavens and LA.
And I'm doing a zeitgeist of LA, maybe just a period of time and feeling it out, see what it looks like. So that's going to be my big plan for this year after the fires. But the fire is going to be a big story. So I might have to shelve the book for this.
Well, for the foreseeable, but that's an extraordinary project. I noticed, by the way, you certainly in the spotlight at the moment is the Menendez brothers story, and I saw some pictures of yours. I think from the original. Was it the original trial?
Yeah, it was the original trial, and I had a day where I got to cover the brothers back in '94, I believe, and I actually briefly spoke to Lyle.
Wow.
He's maybe a couple years younger than me. And most of the people in the courtroom were older. And he really had an opportunity not to speak to anybody's age, And we struck up a hello, how are you doing conversation. It was kind of strange. But yeah, I covered that. And those images have been used all over the world in the last month or two because they are trying to get out of prison for those murders. And I don't know if it's going to happen, but a lot of people seem to think that it may. We'll see.
I'm tempted to ask what sort of legacy you hope to leave behind through your photography. What are the stories of yours that you think that is really, that's what I want to be remembered for? I know we talked right at the start about the LA riots, and of course now we're talking about this story.
Yeah, probably the LA riots. Definitely this story. My work in Los Angeles. I've worked in this city most of my life, so I probably would want to have my work remembered as a Los Angeles-based photographer, even though I've traveled, and I think my work here in Los Angeles would be a nice legacy to. And I've been working with USC to leave them my images, after I retire, so students would be able to, use the images for theses and, future works and history. But I think history is very important, and I want to add to that if possible with my images.
Ted, I don't believe I've ever heard a photographer that shoots the way you do, who's so embedded in what they do and so impassioned by what they do, ever use the R word. I can't quite believe you said retire. I'm not sure that's you, Ted.
Well, there's a time where you just, get so beat up, and it takes a lot to really manage being a photographer in this city. It's a very physical experience. And if you're not up to it, you're really not doing yourself or your photography, If I retire, it would really mean just like not working for the daily grind. I carry a camera every single day, It bugs everybody I'm with. I'll wear a camera, and if I'm not wearing it, it's probably 10, 20 feet from me. So
what is your?
I'm not going to retire the cameras.
What is your EDC, as it's commonly known today?
Well, right now I went back to film, so I EDC either a M6 or an M7,
very nice,
with a wide-angle lens.
Yeah,
because it's so easy to operate, and I just like that you could put it somewhere and it's not just big giant thing.
Wide angle being what kind of range?
Like a 28 or a 50. Sometimes a 50, but mostly 28. I'll drive around the city and I'll take pictures out of my car all the time with it, and drives people behind me nuts, because I'm stopping in the middle road, like, oh, hold on and get a picture. No, I love doing that. I mean, there's other cameras that could do that. Digital could do that, but I just like the experience of shooting film and not getting caught up where you take an image and you're like, oh, I didn't get it, or oh, I got it. I want to remain in the time where I'm taking a picture and just really concentrate on taking photos and not being disappointed or really enthusiastic about my process.
Well, I think sometimes the valediction, stay safe, can sound a little perfunctory, but in your case, I know those words mean something more than a simple sign-off in our conversation. So to close, I'd like you to consider something, Ted, about you as a photographer and your life spent making pictures of moments like this. What's your why?
Well, the reason I got into photography was not just like, oh, I want to be a photographer. I've spoken with other photographers about this. It's like when you speak to maybe a religious person, like a priest or a holy man or a holy woman, they receive the call, it's like a calling to them. And I went into it in baby steps. It wasn't one day I got a Nikon F and I knew this was it. My first camera was a Polaroid, and that was a weird experience to start off with. So I think it grew into my soul, and it's become who I am. And I think it sustains me, and I sustain it. So we have this symbiotic relationship to where we need each other to survive. And it's worked out pretty well. And I like the adventure. I like the access to life it's given me, the things I've been able to see, the places I've been able to go, people I've met. I think it's a rare opportunity. I think it's a great thing for people to do. And I encourage people to become photographers if possible, if they can. But going back to the why, I think it's just become who I am. And it's just taken me to so many wonderful things and places that I don't think I could let it go. And if I do, I think it'd be the end of me. So I like my relationship with photography a lot. It doesn't wear me out, like thinking, oh, I got to get up and take pictures. And I mean, of course, you got to pay the rent and whatever, but what a wonderful way to do it.
And my thanks to Ted Soqui today for sharing his story, and indeed to Marissa as well for sharing her essay and the introduction to Ted. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 123 is waiting for you. It's our extra show for those who support this podcast through Patreon. And, you become the star of it. I think that's honestly I think we have such a USP about this show, to use a very corporate phrase. Sorry, I'll have to go and flagellate myself with a damp copy of this week's Photography Times. But we have such a difference here in terms of what the show sounds like. And I think that carries through to the Extra Mile, where you, the Extra Mile members, become the stars of that show. This week, Extra Miler Christopher Parsons joins me, and we talk about much street photography, inspirations, even the choice of kit, Neil, you'll get a nosebleed, plus, and this is a technical but very important part of our chat, privacy, Neil, yes, the data you hold. The data, it all sounds a bit, I don't know, trust me on this one. I think it's, I think professional or otherwise, the laws of photography, when it comes to the street in particular, is quite important. Here's a taster of what's waiting for you right now.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Some jurisdictions, there are hesitations around taking pictures of people on the street because it could be revealing. And so what will this do to street photography? I think street photography will survive, but it could cause changes in the way that we make images. And so I think that if you're an individual street photographer, one of the things you need to be aware of is technology is moving really, really quickly. So you can be behaving entirely in conformance with law right now, but technology is moving so quickly that those laws may change. And certainly, there are reasons that you could see why people would want them changed, to be fair.
Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to it. It's I was going to say it's a whimsy number, but that doesn't sound like I'm doing it just. It's a beautiful number. It's a floating number. Floaty number. A drifting number. Perfect for a summer's day filming and photographing in long grass. Can you tell I'm longing for the spring and summer? Oh, Neil. Jan 24th, you've got a way to go. This is Yael Krauss and Melody of Longing.
I will choose a rhythm you can dance to and write a song that only you can sing. Anything to make you happy. Silly sentences to hear you laugh bird's nest protected, and have the garden bloom when you come home. Do everything to make you happy, and trust the stars to light your way back to my arms. All I need to every time you go. But when your journey ends, you will find me once Please don't go, please don't go, please don't go, I need you so. Please don't go, please don't go, please don't go, I need you so. Please don't go, please don't I have sung your melody of longing until the last note. I don't feel alone. I miss the way you make me happy. Around the world I have the song to guide me home.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? A melody of longing. Just the title in itself. A few closing thoughts before the PS. Thank you. If you are or you're about to become an extra miler, we've had some new members join us of late, and it's always fantastic to welcome you along and to make you part of the community with our Zoom shows coming up shortly. We're almost at that time again. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together, a safe place to share our thoughts. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members, and Michael Mixon on the research desk. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from Peter Adams, a respected international photographer whose work features in the New York Times, National Geographic, etc., etc. He tells powerful stories about history and politics and technology, actually, making him, quote, an important voice of our time, and they're not wrong, whoever they are. This is our PS for this week from Peter Adams. Great photography is about depth of feeling, not depth of field.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.